Good to have you with us here watching the news. I'm Avni Raja. We're making a start here with the latest as far as India-US talks are concerned. Bilateral talks at the White House. In a first in-person meeting, PM Modi said that India-US economic trade, Indian talent and technology are crucial to bolstering ties, adding that Biden's leadership will play an important role in shaping this decade. On the other hand, Biden hailed the historic moment as the beginning of a new chapter for Indo-US ties. He said that discussions with India on COVID, climate change, and the meet with Quad leaders will ensure stability and a better future.
And I think that's begun to come to pass, and today we're launching a new chapter in the history of U.S.-Indian ties and taking on some of the toughest challenges we face together, starting with a shared commitment to ending the COVID pandemic.
तो ऐसा हुआ है और आज हम एक नया अध्याय शुरू कर रहे हैं भारत और अमेरिका के बीच में, और उसका पहला काम है कि हम इस बड़ी महामारी कोविड-19 को समाप्त करने के लिए वचनबद्धता व्यक्त कर रहे हैं.
The Prime Minister and I were going to be talking today about what more we can do to fight COVID-19, take on the climate challenges that the world face, and ensure stability in Indo-Pacific, including with our own Quad partners.
तो आज प्रधानमंत्री और मैं इस बारे में बात करेंगे किस तरह से कोविड महामारी को दूर किया जाए और किस तरह से जलवायु संकट जो बना हुआ है उसको हम निपट सकें और इंडो पैसिफिक में किस तरह से हम अपने आप को सुरक्षित बना सकें.
Of course, our partnership is more than just what we do. It's about who we are. It's rooted in our shared responsibility to uphold democratic values, our joint commitment to diversity, and it's about family ties, including 4 million Indian Americans who make the United States stronger every single day.
हमारी जो आपस में पार्टनरशिप है, जो हमारी सहभागिता है, उससे कहीं ज्यादा है. हम जानते हैं कि हम लोग कौन हैं और हम चाहते हैं कि इसमें एक विविधता हो. हमारे आपस में पारिवारिक संबंध है क्योंकि 4 मिलियन भारतीय मूल के लोग हैं जो यहाँ पर हमें हमारे देश को ज्यादा सुदृढ़ और ज्यादा मजबूत बनाते हैं.
As the world celebrates Mahatma Gandhi's birthday next week, we're all reminded that his message of non-violence, respect, tolerance matters today maybe more than it ever has.
Right, let's bring in Veena Sikri, former diplomat, who's joining us at this point in time. Thank you so much for joining us here on Mirror Now. Anything in specific that you feel needs to be highlighted in terms of what was said in that joint statement just a short while back? Some of the key words, of course, COVID, climate change is what President Biden spoke about, while Prime Minister Modi spoke about trade as well in what he said.
I think that this is, of course, the meeting at the summit level between our Prime Minister and President Biden comes after a series of meetings that our Prime Minister has been having since yesterday morning. He's met 5 CEOs of the largest American companies for critical factors that India needs: telecommunications, semiconductors, chip manufacturing, drone technology, defense technology, solar technology, and so on. So these are important inputs into what the bilaterals between the two sides will be discussing right now. His meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris was another build-up to today. So I think if you look all in all, what the areas that they will be talking about and that they have focused on in the preliminary words that were said by each side, you have defense, you have security, you have trade, and you have investment. These are the 4 issues for the bilaterals, which are very important. And I think Prime Minister Modi saying that the seeds that will be sown today and the leadership that President Biden will provide will be decisive for the future, not only for bilateral India-US relationship, but for the developments in the world. So I think that this preliminary words are very important. Climate change has also come out as a key, with our Prime Minister mentioning Mahatma Gandhi's concept of trusteeship, that that we have to look after the planet as if we are the trustees of the planet, the world, the human beings of the world. So these are important aspects which have come up, but I do think that the discussions will certainly go beyond this into the area of counterterrorism, because what happened in Afghanistan has really been cataclysmic. It has changed a lot. What is happening with AUKUS, the Australian India, UK, US nuclear submarine arrangement is also very significant. So all these aspects going into it and what is coming out of Quad and the bilateral discussions will certainly set the tone for geopolitics of the world in the coming decades. And I think that Prime Minister's meeting with President Biden and with Quad immediately afterwards are going to set this tone. We have already seen our own bilateral interest in this that have come out of our Prime Minister's meetings yesterday. But today we are seeing the interest in the multilaterals, in the Quad, and how that plans to be shaped. What will be the relationship between Quad and AUKUS? Will they have a relationship at all, or will it be entirely separate? So these aspects are the ones that are going to come out in a big way in the outcome of the Quad meeting. But there are talks about new groups being set up for ensuring a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. What will be happen on maritime security? Will that be discussed? Will there be groups on space, on 5G, and so many other things that we see how the Quad will work itself out on these issues. So you have the bilateral and you have the multilateral aspects. And this has made indeed this visit a very important visit.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And let's also bring in Maruf Raza, Times Network consulting editor, who's also joining me on the phone line at this point in time. Maruf, your perspective here, because, terrorism is something that has always been at the focus as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned. We've always heard him talking about it. This time round, he didn't really use the word terrorism in any form, in that opening statement at least. But he did speak about Mahatma Gandhi, and obviously that the implication of non-violence there does come in. What do you read into this? Do you think somewhere for US, the Afghanistan situation is not going to be right on top of the agenda?
Yeah, it is not going to be right on top of the agenda to talk about Afghanistan. It might be on the top of the agenda for India, and at least people in the Indian media who seem to have gone into a tizzy about events in Afghanistan. But quite frankly, we have our advantages and disadvantages vis-a-vis Afghanistan. The advantage being that we don't have land contiguity there, so we can observe events there without it having immediate spillover effect in India, as much as it will have a spillover effect in Pakistan, because when you create Frankenstein monsters, they end to eat you up at the end of the day. Pakistan's in the past had a refugee crisis from Afghanistan because of meddling in there, and now they'll have more problems in the quicksands of Afghanistan. But to more specific issues which Ambassador Sikri had brought out, while she's a very knowledgeable diplomat, and I agree with most things that she has said, my couple of observations about the Quad meeting that will follow President Biden and Mr. Modi's meeting is that the Quad has a limitation. The first is, I think it's still something in the works. They haven't really clearly defined what are they together for. It started off as a kind of anti-China grouping, but because of the sensitivities involved and because of Chinese putting out threats almost bluntly that don't have collectives of this nature which will upset geopolitics, they've taken a kind of roundabout route to this partnership. Some people have called it the new NATO, but again, NATO was a specific military alliance against the Russians, the Soviets then. Quad seems to be working on a variety of areas. The first thing about Quad is that it's not going to be all for one and one for all. While overall it is going to have an anti-China focus in diplomacy, economic initiatives, and more specifically maritime issues where you're looking at free movement of shipping in the high seas. But what Quad is really lacking, to my mind, is first a collective vision on one or two elements which is going to bind them all together. While you are bound together because of you wanting to become a concert of democracies, then Quad needs to open itself up to more members who are waiting in the wings to join in, like Vietnam and South Korea, for example. Secondly, Quad doesn't have a secretariat. Quad needs to have that so that Quad can then, work collectively to agendas which are worked out. I think they'll need to agree on that in this meeting in Washington. The third thing is, amongst the current Quad members right now, India is the only one that has a land border with China, At the same time, India is involved in maritime exercises with other Quad members. So therefore, China sees India, other than America, as the big troublemaker for China's agenda in Asia and the world. The question that I would have for Mr. Modi's visit there, is he going to come back with assurances from America that if push comes to shove, will America put its foot down to stall Chinese activities against India in the event of a territorial confrontation? I'm not sure they'll do it, because Mr. Biden has made it known that his new foreign policy agenda is not going to see boots on the ground anywhere. He's going to talk of over-the-horizon operations. Over-the-horizon is essentially air, drone, and satellite-like operations that may or may not be required if there is just a land border altercation between India and China, like it happened in the LAC last year. The second aspect that Mr. Modi needs to take an assurance from the US is, can India engage with other countries in the Quad and in the international community like France to go ahead and build nuclear submarines with France if America is doing it with another Quad member, that is Australia? Because India needs that technology more than Australia, but we were never offered that. So what is that level of deep partnership we are talking about? Is it only that India is a market for the Americans to do business in? Or is America literally seeing India as a hand-in-glove partner in geostrategic challenges that America wants to define geopolitics in the coming decade?
Yes, absolutely, Maruf. Some very important and pertinent points that you've brought up there. Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation, also joins in. Just to take Maruf's point forward, Alok Bansal, these assurances that India will possibly look for, in this visit, during this meet, especially with Joe Biden, how do you perceive that? Do you think there is something that we could possibly actually come back with?
See, as far as assurances from United States are concerned, there is actually a question mark at this point of time on the credibility of United States to a very great extent. And to that extent, I think this meeting comes at a very, very significant time. I think US is also trying to reassure its allies that it is a reliable ally. Because what happened in Afghanistan and subsequently what happened in AUKUS has raised certain serious questions about the reliability of the United States as an ally. Because, so to that extent, I think assurances which President Biden is giving have an important facet, because at this juncture, they are probably meant to reassure its allies, especially the Quad members, that US is committed to Quad, because there are serious question marks on what is the future in store for Quad. Because as you know, after AUKUS, a lot of people raised questions as to why AUKUS and what is the relevance of Quad. And the two countries which are not in AUKUS of the Quad, that is India and Japan, are not Anglophone countries, are probably so. What Maruf asked that question, that Australia is being provided a technology which has not been provided to us, which we have been wanting for a long period of time, is relevant. But I have always believed that India and US are two countries which share common values. And common values, and to a very great extent common interests. And that actually automatically draws the two countries together. And to the extent, yes, President Biden did not talk about Afghanistan. It's to some extent a setback. But what is more important is that when Vice President Kamala Harris met Prime Minister, she talked of Pakistan and the cross-border terrorism. So I feel at this point of time, there is a serious rethink going on in the United States as far as what they did in Afghanistan. Probably President Biden doesn't want to talk about it because it may be a little embarrassing for them. But I think within the policy-making circles, there is a rethink as to what needs to be done as far as Afghanistan is concerned. We saw during in the Senate when people actually demanded that Pakistan needs to be sanctioned. So I think the duplicitous behavior of Pakistan has been exhibited as far as the international community is concerned. And at this point of time, there are sections of US community which are extremely perturbed and upset with the way Taliban is governing Afghanistan. There are a large number of veterans who actually fought in Afghanistan. They feel cheated. They feel that did we fight in Afghanistan? Did we sacrifice our time and lives in Afghanistan to hand over Afghanistan back to an obscurantist regime like Taliban? So there are question marks, and people have seen that Taliban is nothing but a stooge of Pakistan. So that anger is being directed against Pakistan, and we saw that in Senate. We are seeing that in social media consistently. So there are questions at this point of time. Of course, it's more of wait and watch. Right. There are a lot of fields where we have collaborations. We will have collaborations. And as I said, Quad is not a defense alliance. It's actually a strategic alliance which has multifaceted dimensions. We have talked of vaccine pool, we have talked of emerging technologies, we are looking at green technologies, we are looking at climate change, and these are many issues where there is enormous opportunity for collaboration. But what is more important for Quad is that India needs to be built up to a level where it could be seen as an economic challenger to China, which is very, very important. And to that extent, we need American investment here, the American technology here. And if that comes, I think we will see that there will be an alternative to China, because at this point of time, many of the emerging developing countries see China as an economic powerhouse, which has no parallel or which has no alternative. So to that extent, I think it's important that the Quad countries focus on India. And to that extent, in Prime Minister's meeting of 5 CEOs of important multinational corporations was also a step in the right direction. And I think this is what we are looking at. And one of the biggest strengths of Indo-US relationship has been the rising of the Indian diaspora. In fact, the Indo-US relations have come up with the rise of Indian diaspora. And nothing symbolizes than the election of Kamala Harris as the vice president. And I think Prime Minister said so very clearly that you are a source of inspiration for a large number of migrants across the globe, and for a large number of people who have gone from this country to different parts of the world. They would definitely look up to you where you have reached. So I think overall, India-US relations are on the right track. Maybe at this point of time on some issues, maybe wait and watch. But as I said, common values and to great extent common interests will drive the two countries together. And that's one of the reasons why you see a bipartisan consensus in US as far as good relations with India are concerned.
Right. All right. I'd like to thank all of you for joining in and giving us that perspective here. There's obviously going to be a lot more to talk about once that meeting is over, and then post that the Quad Summit as well will be held. So we'll continue to track all of these developments. But for now, let's listen in to what that joint statement that came in earlier.
लेकिन मैं देख रहा हूं कि ये दशक 21वीं शताब्दी के तीसरे दशक का ये पहला वर्ष, मैं पूरे दशक की तरफ देख रहा हूं कि आपके नेतृत्व में जो बीज हम बोएंगे, इस पूरा दशक हमारी दृष्टि से बहुत ही भारत और अमेरिका के संबंध में, विश्व के लोकतांत्रिक देशों के लिए एक बहुत ही ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव ये कालखंड रहेगा, ऐसा मेरा विश्वास है।
All right, on that note, we're going to slip into a quick break. We'll be back.